from a city where a little less than 250 years ago, the first newspaper of Asia was printed. Thank you from a city which led the Renaissance, which spread the education in this part of the world. And this city is a very simple city with very simple questions. And this city this evening asks itself that what are our journalists and journalism up to? This house asks itself this question this evening, that journalism today is more intent on pleasing rather than presenting. Of course, we will have a strong set of arguments for the motion, and that will be matched vowel by vowel, consonant by consonant, by an equally charged opposition. And it's a great pleasure this evening to request our dear friend and a person who probably is one of the most acclaimed authors in 3 languages on various issues to do with the media, the ethics of the media. Nobody has inspected it better and in greater depth than Porunjada. Porunjada, the floor is yours.
I could never have imagined that I would be sitting next to one Dr. Anand Ranganathan, and I could never imagine that we're speaking on the same side. In the past, I've only met him virtually, and usually we've been trying to find choice epithets to criticize each other, so it's a pleasant surprise. But as a journalist who's been working for the last 46 years, including, as I told you, when I started with the Telegraph, I am ashamed, disappointed, deeply so, when I look at my brothers and sisters, my sons and daughters in journalism, who have forgotten what they were supposed to do. Yeah, we've heard of the media being part of the fourth estate. We've heard about Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India, which gives every citizen a fundamental right to free expression. Yes, we also have reasonable restrictions on that right, Article 19(2). But I believe the job of journalism in a democracy is to hold truth to power, to ask questions, not goody-goody questions, but difficult questions, to those who are ruling us. Why is such a large section of the media in India, true for certain countries in the world, not true for all countries in the world, but certainly in India, why are they so determined to act as if they work for public relations companies or advertising agencies? But the role of a journalist in a democracy is to be critical of those who are in power, ask them tough questions. And why has this particular phenomenon been so widespread across large sections of the media, especially over the last 10 years or so? You will note that Sri Narendra Modi is the first and so far only Prime Minister of India who's never held an unscripted, spontaneous press conference. Never. Journalists who ask him questions he wants to be asked, never cross-questioning, almost never happens. Sri Akshay Kumar, remember he asked him a very important question which his driver had asked him to ask him. Modi ji, aap aam kaise khate hain? The Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy being asked, aap kaat ke khate hain ya choose ke khate hain? So when you have an atmosphere of this sort, why are you surprised? Why are you surprised that my friend RSS, Rahul Shiv Shankar, is what he is? Why are you surprised whether Arnab Goswami, who had a different avatar when he used to some years ago, is too busy criticizing the opposition and not those who are in power? There are journalists who are ideologically aligned with the ruling party. Say my friend Rajat Sharma, he was always a supporter of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. He was a member of the Akhil Bharati Vidyarthi Parishad from his college days. So he's ideologically on one side. But there are others whose owners have told them, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So the owners are so dependent on government advertising and advertising which is given to them by public sector organizations that they only sing one tune. Instead of presenting facts, instead of analyzing those facts, you're too busy pleasing those who are in power. Because you believe that's when the advertising revenue will come, and that's how you'll keep your organization going. So you don't care about democracy. You don't care about strengthening democracy. And we wouldn't be able to call ourselves a democracy if it hadn't been for the fact that you could hold accountable those who are in positions of power and authority. Now, I have seen how our profession has degenerated, and particularly the pace at which it has degenerated over the last 10 years has been mind-boggling. Thank you very much.
After Porunjada, it's a great pleasure to request Anand, Mr. Anand Ranganathan.
Let me now begin. Journalism in India, ladies and gentlemen, was once a profession. It has now become a trade. It has no more moral function than the manufacture of soap. It does not regard itself as responsible advisor of the public, to give the news uncolored by any motive, to present a certain view of public policy which it believes to be for the good of the community, to correct and chastise without fear all those, no matter how high, who have chosen a wrong or a barren path, is not regarded by journalism in India its first or foremost duty. To accept a hero and worship him has become its principal duty. Under it, news gives place to sensation, reasoned opinion to unreasoning passion, appeal to the minds of responsible people, to appeal to the emotions of the irresponsible. Indian journalism is written by drum boys to glorify their heroes. Never has the interest of the country been sacrificed so senselessly for the propagation of hero worship. Now, I would want a show of hands out here. How many of you believe what I just said is true? Okay. Quite a lot of hands have gone up. Well, I must tell you that these were not my words, but rather verbatim, the words of Dr. Ambedkar on Indian journalism, spoken nearly a century ago. Nothing has changed in 100 years. You believe what you see, but unfortunately what you see is written by those who see what they believe. Objectivity has become a metallic object that must be left behind before the journalist passes through the newspaper threshold. The biases have stopped beeping altogether. Journalists have realized, forget the risk of losing government ad revenue or patronage for their organizations. They have realized that if they have to escape prison, they must please their political masters, be there in Delhi or in Bengal. In light of what Dr. Ambedkar said a century ago, the topic of the debate needs to be tweaked a little. It is not that journalism today is more intent on pleasing rather than presenting. It is that journalism has always been intent on pleasing rather than presenting. Journalism has always been the first defense of the crooked, of the propagandists, of those carrying an agenda. Ironically, as the quality of journalism plummets, the citizens have become more aware of the devious games being played at their expense. Social media has brought about democratization of voices that are heard. The journalists and those who control them detest this. Of course they do. But there is little they can do except to pass more and more draconian laws to curb freedom of speech. I can go on and on, but I realize that my interjection would not be complete without providing examples of how journalists, either viscerally or through political pressure, have stopped asking questions of those who most need to answer for in a democracy. Examples that illustrate how journalists are more intent on pleasing than presenting the truth. I begin with Modi. Just 2 examples out of hundreds would suffice. The annual budget is going to be presented in a couple of weeks' time. But did you know that 21% of the 45 lakh crore odd sum will be allocated for propping up 1,830 public sector units, out of which 400 are non-functional? Except Air India, there has been zero privatization. And as for disinvestment, the PSUs that are sold are bought by other PSUs. PFC, LIC, NTPC buying REC, Coal India, TDHC and NEEPCO. Nationalized banks are rife with corruption. Bad loans worth 14 lakh crores have been written off in the last 10 years, out of which only 2 lakh crores have been recovered. Meanwhile, 3 lakh crores have been infused in these very nationalized banks. And as if that was not enough, 3 lakh crores have also been infused into the loss-making BSNL. Why am I quoting all these figures of loss-making government businesses? Because it was in 2013 that PM Narendra Modi said that the government has no business to be in business. He repeated it in 2017, and then in 2019, and then in 2022, almost as a ritual. Every time he increased the business of the government in business. Now I ask you, in the last 10 years, has there been a single journalist who has dared to question Narendra Modi on this criminal hypocrisy? No. Let me take another example. In July last year, Modi accused the NCP and Ajit Pawar of being corrupt and perpetrating massive scams. The very next day, Ajit Pawar and other corrupt NCP leaders were inducted into the Maharashtra government run by the BJP. Did any journalist dare to ask Modi why? No. Has any journalist ever asked PM Modi why did the BJP demand arrest of the Congressman Anand Singh accused of 15 forest crime charges, but then made him the forest minister when he joined the BJP? Why did the BJP demand an ED raid on YS Chaudhary, accusing him of massive financial bungling and fraud of 5,700 crores, but then reneged on its demand when Chaudhary joined the BJP? Who in the BJP changed the Vijay Mallya lookout notice from detained to inform, allowing him to flee? Why did the BJP demand arrest of D. Monsarrat for child rape and burning down a police station, but then took back its demand when he joined the BJP? Why did the BJP demand an FIR against Kripa Shankar Singh for launching a book that claimed 2611 was an RSS conspiracy, but then went back on its demand when he joined the BJP? But if you think Modi is the only hypocrite in town and journalists are only concerned about pleasing him and no one else, you could not be more mistaken. Case in point are the next two examples. Agriculture contributes only 12% to our GDP, and yet 44% of our 515 million strong labor force is involved in it. In the West, it is 2%. Production to purchase the entire chain is archaic, almost medieval. The entire sector was crying out for farm reforms, but when Modi implemented them, Rahul Gandhi and Congress poured on to the streets opposing them tooth and nail. Ironical, because the three farm laws were almost verbatim promised by the Congress in its 2019 manifesto. Verbatim. Congress promised them. But because Modi implemented them, those very farm laws suddenly became black laws. But did any journalist dare to ask Rahul Gandhi why he and his party took a shameless U-turn and held the entire country to ransom for a year? Let me give you another example. 9 years ago, the High Court convicted the BJP for violating the FCRA Act and accepting illegal donations. It was a conviction that carried prison sentences, not just a rap on the knuckles. What did the BJP do? In broad daylight, on the floor of Parliament, 30 more seconds, Dr. Sarkar. Maybe a minute more because I need to bribe you. On the floor of the Parliament, the BJP amended the FCRA Act, going back all the way to the emergency to make the violations ineffective. The High Court was rendered toothless. Now, any opposition party would have lashed on to this blatant misuse of power. It would have come onto the streets, perhaps even brought the government down. This was a godsend. But the Congress did no such thing. In fact, the Congress supported the BJP in amending the FCRA Act. You know why? Because the High Court had also convicted the Congress for violating the FCRA Act. Did any journalist ask Rahul Gandhi why this thing happened? No. They only parrot what Rahul speaks, and finally, I need to, Dr. Sarkar, because I really need to bribe you. This is the end thrust. Please allow me just a minute.
Yeah, but since the amount is undecided, just wrap up quickly. Yeah.
Yes. Now, I have dealt with the so-called Godi media and the PD media. I guess the troika would not be complete if I do not mention BB media. For years now, and I'm going to make sure that Telegraph never sponsors the CDC again. For years now, when it comes to unpleasant...
you really need to wind up now. Yeah.
For years now, when it comes to unpleasant news regarding the state government, the media here has perfected the art of either staying silent or reporting it as news in brief on the 20th page, bottom left, font size 10. Perhaps they have learned their lesson, including the Telegraph, from the hounding and persecution of slapping the multiple cases on Avik Sarkar before he was forced to step down.
Anand, you really need to wrap up because I've got a job to go back to tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you very much. There isn't a job for me in Delhi. You'll get a chance again. Thank you.
Will you give me 30 seconds? Vox Populi. Vox Populi. Okay. So, as brilliant professors are slapped around and arrested for forwarding harmless cartoons and acquitted after 11 years, as journalists like Deva Mallya Bagchi are picked up in the middle of the night and thrown in jail, as 20,000 panchayat seats go uncontested because of murder, arson and loot, as ballot boxes are stuffed by Trinamool workers right under the gaze of the camera, as the High Court laments that FIRs were not registered in 60% of the cases of post-poll violence, as blood-curdling affidavits are submitted by half-dead women, as judges recuse themselves because of threats, as 40 crores of cash is recovered from the home of TMC conduits. As President COVID is compared to COVID, the Telegraph happily consigns itself to organizing debates, asking if journalists are more intent on pleasing than presenting. You say you speak truth to power, but it seems for you only Modi is in power, Didi is not. Finally, for my great friend, Calcutta, for my great friend, the issue now is no longer of journalists pleasing Indians. It has transcended our borders. So now journalists please foreign powers as well. So as China wrecks the world economy, kills millions through a virus that it helped deliberately spread, as China interns 1 million Muslims in concentration camps and demolishes 70 million mosques, there is stunned silence in the editorial rooms of Hindu and the News Click. Ask why. This is where journalism is right now. I'm so sorry I've taken so much more time than I should have. Thank you.
Anand, you indeed have. Well, thank you. We'll come back to it.
Can I sit on that side?
No, Anand, have a sip of water and relax. Yeah. You see, the reason I wanted to stop you in the middle of the list is I was getting more and more anxious that what on earth would Priyanka speak about, you know? Because half of what you had on the list, I think was Priyanka had already thought through, hadn't you? Now, before Anand says any more, please get up and get started. It's a great pleasure.
And though on the other side, but whatever Anand said in the last 1 minute is absolutely correct. So I would like to say that the first speaker who spoke here, अरे मोदी के बिना आपको एक शाम की इवनिंग यहाँ हजम नहीं हो रही, मोदी के बिना लोगों को कुछ कहीं हजम नहीं होता, because मोदी है तो मुमकिन है. देखिए कोई कहता है देश बेच दिया, ये कहते हैं मीडिया को खरीद लिया. आप डिसाइड करिए ना आखिर मोदी ने किया क्या है, खरीदा है या बेचा है. As George Orwell said, that journalism is about printing things which others will not like, but that's the truth. So that is why whatever they are showing today on the news channels is not appreciated by everyone, but that is the reality. Like in only today's news, there was that in the Ganga Sagar Mela, a troop of sadhus who were crossing Purulia asked certain people कि क्या रास्ता है, उस गाड़ी को उलट दिया गया, उनको मारा गया, उनके बाल खींचे गए, कपड़े फाड़ दिए गए. All that is there in the news. Now can you tell me that this news which is being telecasted, is it being done to please Modi? No, because that is the fact which is happening. That is why they are showing. So the CA and the NRC protests, when they were on the streets and openly all the news channels were showing, everything was against the government. But did Modi ask the news channels not to show it? Same for the farmers' protest which was happening there on the streets. Everybody directly questioned the government. That what is the government doing? Why farmers are committing suicide? But still, it was there on all the newspapers, all the channels, YouTube, everywhere. मोदी ने अगर मीडिया को खरीद लिया था तो कैसे दिखाया जा रहा था? In the beginning, one of the person from the other end, he was speaking about Article 19, freedom of speech. My friend was speaking about freedom of speech. I'd like to remind you that one unlawful assembly which took place in JNU. Journalists, certain journalists, they said, where slogans like this were raised, कि भारत की कश्मीर की आजादी तक जंग होगी, अफजल हम शर्मिंदा हैं, तेरे कातिल जिंदा है, and certain journalists supported them. Now give me an answer. It was done to please whom? When the integrity and sovereignty of your country doesn't matter. एक बंदे के पीछे आप पड़े हो, क्योंकि वो चाहता है कि हम आत्मनिर्भर भारत बने.
Hello, Saket Gokhale, the Trinamool MP and one of the most firebrand right to information activists in our country now.
Before I start off though, I would like to remind a friend on our own side, Mr. Ranganathan, is that no, the Enforcement Directorate is not going to the Telegraph offices tomorrow. The last one-third of your speech, great criticism. I would just invite you to go and give the first one-third of your speech in Ahmedabad tomorrow and see what happens. I've done it. I spent 6 months in jail for doing that. But today what journalism has been reduced to, yes, journalists are still reporting. Let me clarify that. Journalists across all media houses are reporting. But what are they reporting? What a certain person sitting in the PMO writes on a WhatsApp and sends them to them. They're going to sit down, they're going to read that verbatim, they're going to tweet about it. If there is a typo in the original WhatsApp message, there's going to be a typo in the tweet as well. So they are reporting diligently. So what they have become is they have become press outlets where the government could just issue a press release. They have turned that into a news channel reporting that as news, and they're even holding a debate onto it. And then in India, we have this very interesting concept of a political analyst. So what they will do is, I'm going to invite 3 or 4 supporters of the BJP who are not yet part of the BJP, but they'll come on a news channel as political analysts. There they go on, they sit there. There's a lot of people here on the stage as well who made their careers that way, but I'm not going to get into that. But these political analysts will sit. The job is to praise the BJP, and lo and behold, a few days later, you will see that they've become spokespersons of that party. We live in a very polarized time where there is media that seeks to please the right wing. There is also a certain echo chamber of the media or journalists who pull out to please people on the left. So it's not that echo chambers don't exist on both sides. One is state-sponsored, one is not. That's the only difference. But there are echo chambers on both sides. Today, what you're being shown is either what you want to see or what the government wants you to see. What you're not being shown is what is actually happening out there. And that is the problem with journalism today. They either want to please the government, they want to please you, but nobody really wants to show you what is going on out there. And that is the problem. It is not about who the media is pleasing, but the problem is that the media today is not presenting. Thank you very much.
Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram, and Jai Ma. I'm grateful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to engage on the subject. As usual, it has come down to Congress versus BJP, even on a subject which I think is of great importance to people and the quality of public discourse. But since we have anyway entered this hammam, so to speak, let's see how many of us are clothed in this hammam. The subject that's been presented for today is that journalism today is more interested in pleasing rather than presenting. True to my, let's say, training as a lawyer, I'll try and split my submission at least in 3 parts, taking about 2 minutes each. The first is to present my position. The second is to present facts supporting the position. And the third is leaving it to the audience on the basis of my summary to draw their own conclusions. Having appeared in certain politically incorrect matters, I'm used to taking on a hostile audience, so game on, no problem. First, I think the framing of the question or the framing of the proposition itself needs to be questioned for a slightly different reason altogether. When someone says that journalism today is more interested in pleasing than presenting, I think it's very convenient and mighty rich to reduce the scope of analysis only to 2014 to 2023. Because then it's almost as if there is a golden period of journalism that we have all witnessed in the past, and suddenly things have gone to the dumps. Before I proceed, I certainly agree with Mr. Gokhale on one point, and this is perhaps one of those rare instances where the twain shall meet, which is Telegraph certainly has the guts to get the rest of us to criticize the government because it can't do it itself. So I will certainly congratulate them for having developed the spine to shoot from our able shoulders. Thank you. Point number 1. When we speak of revenue, when we speak of presentation of facts, and when we speak of sobriety in representation or reportage, so to speak, you must understand where all of this comes from. I would want to use Gangotri, but sorry, I don't wish to use Gangotri, which is such a pure term in the context of the Gandhis. I'd call it Gandhotri. Okay. The DNA of the media as it stands today is significantly forged and shaped by the crucible of the emergency. It is significantly forged by the Nehruvian legacy and the Gandhian legacy, not Mahatma Gandhi, but Indira Gandhi. Taken forward ably by her son Rajiv Gandhi and even by Sri Manmohan Singh, Dr. Manmohan Singh, the most educated Prime Minister of this country, apparently. First, independent India certainly saw enough voices which had the guts and the temerity and the audacity to question the Nehruvian government. However, the fact of the matter remains that the Nehruvian government did not display democratic tendencies. In fact, it demonstrated anti-democratic tendencies. The very first amendment to the constitution with respect to free speech was promulgated and enacted because Mr. Nehru's government lost in the Supreme Court, thanks to Ramesh Thapar and Brij Bhushan, both of whom questioned the land reform policies of Mr. Nehru. So to overcome a judgment of the Supreme Court, he introduces the First Amendment, which has significantly broader, vaguer, and blanket proscriptions against free speech. Something that was, of course, supported by the chairman of the Constitution, let's say, drafting committee of the Constitution, his law minister, so to speak, the lawyer to the government, Dr. Ambedkar. Now, why is this crucial? It's not as if this particular tendency was limited to the Nehruvian government, because the fact of the matter is, apart from instances under his legacy, it was under the emergency or during the emergency, the government developed a tendency to classify media under 3 categories: friendly, hostile, and neutral. These were revealed. These are documented facts. Based on their reportage, 12 days before the imposition of the emergency, during the emergency, they basically slotted these newspapers as friendly, hostile, and neutral. Now, which were these newspapers? Let me actually wash this dirty linen in public for a moment. Amrit Bazar Patrika, Hindu, and Hindustan Times and Times of India were classified as government-friendly based on the reportage before and during the emergency. Now, these are the voices which are apparently speaking truth to power. Now, why is this crucial? Emergency effectively led to a certain tendency where independent voices were told, fall in line or there will be repercussions in addition to loss of revenue. Now, again, why is this crucial? Because revenue was the point that was raised. Most people don't know that the Press Information Bureau and the Directorate of Advertisement and Visual Publicity were constituted during the emergency to screen reportage and to ensure that people are effectively threatened on the basis of the government advertising they would get or they would not get depending on how they speak. Now, this is important because when someone says that the job of a reporter is to only present, I'm sorry, no, it is not the job of a reporter only to present. The job of the reporter is to contribute to information discourse by elevating the course of public discourse and contributing to shaping of opinions and to formation of opinions. There's nothing wrong with it. Which means I am perfectly comfortable with a journalist who at least wears his ideological proclivities on his sleeve as opposed to hiding behind the facade of neutrality. So what we have gone through all these years is the Indian traffic position, which is keep left, being the mainstream position as far as media is concerned, and the keep left position is presented as neutrality, so that whoever speaks against it comes out as a dictatorial right wing. You see how convenient this is and what kind of a trap you are in. Your position, which is ideologically biased, becomes a neutral position. Everybody else has to swing according to that. So the fact of the matter is, when opposition parties realize that the only way you get some column space in newspapers is by actually interfering with the media, the path to that has been paved by the government that has been in power for 40 years at the very least, thanks to the DNA that has been shaped under its regime. So it's mighty convenient to say that today it has changed. No, it hasn't. This has always been the case, and on this I agree with Dr. Ranganathan. Second, this is one example that I have to give before I close. I just have 1 minute. I'll give 2 more examples and I'll leave it at that. Perhaps someone should open the annals of history and take a look at the role played by Sri V.C. Shukla during the regime. Officers of the information service were effectively tasked together along with IPS officers to go after journalists and the reportage because they were expected to only present. Which is to say, you will not air an opinion except for plain, cold reportage of facts. So when someone says that the journalist's job is only to present, they're actually taking us back to the age of emergency, which is to say, you will not have an independent opinion. So I'm sorry, I don't agree that the job of a journalist is only to present as much as it is not their job to please. Today, therefore, there is a competitive race between both, let's say, national parties or people in the political spectrum, so to speak, to compete for the ability to weave their own narratives. This is something that was started by the great Pandit of this country, Sri Nehru, the fount of everything that's great in this country. Finally, from 1999 until 2014, or even thereafter, I would want to understand the number of times the Super Prime Minister of this country, the lady, was ever interviewed by any mainstream journalist. And if they ever managed to ask her questions such as, how difficult was it for you to say no to the position of the Prime Minister? How do you manage to wade through this politics despite your gender? When you aspire for the, let's say, for the post of the Prime Minister of the country, you're expected to rise above your gender as much as possible. So you actually handed the contender for the Prime Minister's position a victim card on a platter, and this, according to you, was fantastic mainstream neutral journalism? Please ask yourself what kind of questions you've asked of people in power in the past. 3, the number of channels in this country which are owned by political parties itself bears noting. From Sakshi TV to Sun TV to Jaya TV, it's owned across the board. So if we have such serious problems with corporate entities owning media, let's say voices, so to speak, or media platforms, why haven't these people actually started asking questions or actually filed a petition before the Supreme Court? Because every day, all sorts of petitions are filed before the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to lay down guidelines with respect to political ownership of platforms directly. Why hasn't it happened so far? So I would only submit one final thing before I take leave of the audience. You're being played by both sides. And that's precisely why serious journalism is happening today, but outside the portals of mainstream media. Ultimately, the quality of journalism that gets support and traction is a reflection of the taste of the society as we stand today. So if you're serious about supporting serious independent voices, go for blogs, go for specialist portals, not mainstream media. Nobody is actually doing justice to your mandate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepak. And I think it's not very often that his reference to the freedom of speech clause of the Indian Constitution gets mentioned. Because in its first avatar, when the Constitution was drafted, it was very much on the lines of the American First Amendment. And then it metamorphosed, it changed itself, and so many ifs and buts crept into the Indian freedom of expression clause in our Constitution. It really was a shadow of its original self.
Dr. Sarkar, brief interruption.
Yeah.
At least two speakers on both sides have spoken for 3 minutes more. I feel penalized.
We will be.
I feel penalized that I stuck to my time and I did not say several things that I wanted to say, whereas others, you were very,
you will be given your time. No anxiety, you know. We welcome once again amongst us a very graceful member of the Indian National Congress, one of its spokesperson, an accomplished dancer, and one of the fewest dentists whom I do not dread meeting, Shama Muhammad.
So the topic today is on pleasing rather than presenting. And one thing has not been spoken on, why pleasing? The pleasing is because of the threat. And we also remember how Twitter took off the account of Donald Trump. Do you ever think we could do that in India? Take the account out of Narendra Modi? Never. Let me tell you, my Facebook posts have come down, my Twitter likes have come down, and I know perfectly well why people cannot see it. She spoke about Afzal Guru. She said they wanted something about us. Who? Kisne फांसी दिलवाया Afzal Guru ko? Who hung Afzal Guru? The UPA government. Who hung Ajmal Kasab? The UPA government, the Congress party. How dare you talk about us? But let me tell you what happens to journalists, serious journalists. Siddiq Kappan, UAPA, for reporting Hathras. 5 journalists in Kashmir behind bars, UAPA. Investigation on Pranay Roy. We all know what happened to NDTV now. It's been sold. NewsClick behind bars, UAPA. Why? Because they say they get funding from China. What is PM Cares? Didn't Vivo give money to PM Cares? What is that? Why haven't journalists pointed out that part? Where in PM Cares, there's money come from China, Vivo, Xiaomi, all of those. Initially, the Prime Minister was soliciting funds for PM Cares, saying it's a government fund. Recently, they came out and said it's a private fund. Then why did our PSUs give money to it? I also want to include Quint News Minute also being investigated. Retail inflation is at 5.9%. Gas prices are above 1,000. Petrol prices are above 100. 10% unemployment. 22 to 24 years old, 44% employment. Do you hear any stories on that? You don't. Why don't you hear? Prime Minister of India has not stepped into Manipur. Let's understand that. Murder still happening there. Rahul Gandhi, my leader, has gone there, comforted people. The Prime Minister of India spoke on it for 2 minutes. Is the media reporting? No, they are much more interested about the Prime Minister's trip and Andhi or Tufan Rahul Gandhi ko nahi rok sakte. Narendra Modi kabhi nahi. Let me tell you that. So that is it. Rahul Gandhi has gone to Manipur. He's going to Manipur. There is strife there. Every leader in the world, when there is an issue, they address the nation and say, I want Shanti, peace, Aman. Have you heard the Prime Minister of India address the nation? Before 2014, everything was taken up. I still remember 2611, accountability. Shivraj Patil resigned. Who is accountable now for Manipur? Who has resigned? Why hasn't the media taken it up? Who got in the right to information? That is against corruption. The right to information is being watered down every day. That is also for journalists, let me tell you that, a very important tool. That has been watered down after the Modi government is coming. So do not point fingers during our time, because the media was free to report what they want. Media made fun of Manmohan Singh. Here now you can't even make fun of the speaker.
I heard this story about two priests whose arguments were really weak, and they still had to preach. And one said, "My argument is so weak, I never stop when my time is up. I continue." And he said, "How long do you continue?" The other one asked. And he said, "I continue till I find people looking at their watches." The other said, "When the argument is weaker, I carry on even more when they look at their watches." And he said, "When do you stop?" He said, "When they take their watches off their wrist, hold it against their ear and shake it to see was it working." And so, Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, we've had two examples of two priests who waited for you to look at your watches and hang it next to your ear, so you can well understand how strong their argument must be. If you want to look at the beauty of a flower, you have to see the color of its petals. If you have to appreciate the ferocity of a tiger, you have to see its snarls and its nails and its fangs. If you have to understand the nature of a politician in Calcutta, you have to check whether he's red or saffron or blue. Only after you see the presentation can you decide whether you will be pleased or displeased with the creature in front of you. And hence, presentation is the first thing that a journalist has to do. Pleasure, pleasing, displeasing occurs thereafter. Point that Anand Ranganathan's speech reminded me of. He said, "In Calcutta, how do you please your political bosses in Bengal and Delhi at the same time?" The answer is you can't. Because this state, we've always had, as I've said before, two elephants, one elephant from a tribe in the center, another elephant from a tribe in the state, fighting it out on the grasslands of Bengal. And when two elephants fight, it is always the grass that suffers. Imagine the poor journalist standing in the middle of the trampled grass, having to decide which leg of which elephant is responsible for trampling more grass. That presentation is likely to endanger his life, his liberty, his job. To my mind, the last time an objective presentation was made in this country was when Sanjay described the war to Dhritarashtra. There has never been objective presentation by anybody after that. Thank you of that. But coming back to the paradox of presenting and pleasing being two sides of the same coin, let's look at an example. Here in Bengal, a Trinamool leader of the Panchayat is found dead outside his home, lying in a pool of blood. What would a narrative be? The narrative would be a Panchayat leader of the Trinamool was found dead outside his home, lying in a pool of blood. The cause is being investigated. It always makes me intrigued that the police take a few months to find out who the murderer is. Our courts of law take a few years to put the right people in jail, as we've seen. But the media diagnoses the cause of death and the murderers within seconds of appearing on the scene. And I do not see sometimes the need of having either press or courts when we have the media to do the job. So here's the media. This is a media that owes allegiance to the local governments here. They arrive and say, this Trinamool Panchayat leader has been brutally murdered by the opposition members from the BJP, possibly with help even from the Congress and the left front. And they have all brutally murdered this man outside his home. Then comes the media with its allegiance to the center. And they say, this man was found dead outside his home. It is accused that the BJP did it. But the truth is, this is an internal faction feud of the Trinamool that has caused his death. So when the first media is looked upon by his bosses in the state, that media person is said, look, he's presenting facts.
But when the second media comes and says, the bosses in the state say, he's pleasing, he's not presenting. So that is our second point, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasing and presenting are paradoxically two different points of view, depending on whom you owe allegiance to. In fact, I have to at this time point out the Right Honorable Mr. Saket, who talked about the role of the media and offered kudos to the Telegraph, thus proving the very point that journalism in the Telegraph and other newspapers actually present, they do not please. Thank you for making the point from our side. Even most powerful was the speaker who followed, Shama Muhammad. I sat open-mouthed throughout her whole speech, trying to work out what Afzal Guru, Azmal Qasam, atrocities against journalists, Manipur, Rahul Gandhi's travel across the country had to do with the topic. Till, ladies and gentlemen, I realized why I was open-mouthed. We all stay open-mouthed longer than we want when we are in the company of dentists. They have coined a term called fake news. How can the news be fake? It's an oxymoron. It's like talking about a satanic god or a poison delicacy or a sinful member of the Calcutta Club. You can look for one, you'll never spot one. Our point is too very clear. First, the press has to present. That is the primary job. The presentation can please some and displease some. They do not please or displease first. They present first. Secondly, whether you think they're presenting or pleasing depends on whether you are wearing clothes that are red, blue, or saffron underneath. And therefore, there is no absolute term like presenting or like pleasing. And there I rest our case. Thank you very much.
The floor is yours, Ashutosh. Thanks.
मैं जब पूरी डिबेट आज सुन रहा था तो मुझे ये लगा ही नहीं कि किसी ने अगेंस्ट द मोशन बोला है, तो फिर ये डिबेट आज कैसे हुई? I just fail to understand. There is no debate. The issue is already done. The journalism in this country has degenerated to a level that nobody has guts to defend the kind of journalism which is happening in the country. And I'm glad that those who are supposed to speak against the motion, they are also speaking for the motion. And it's good for the democracy. It's brilliant for the democracy that those who are killing democracy in the country, that those who are not letting the debate happen in the country, they also are so ashamed that they will not speak against the motion. I'm sorry to use a harsh word. I apologize for that, but that is the reality. It's fashionable to go back to Jawaharlal Nehru, rubbish him. But those who say so, वो भूल जाते हैं कि अगर इस देश के अंदर डेमोक्रेसी नहीं होती, अगर इस देश के अंदर नेहरू नहीं होते, तो आज जो लोग सत्ता में बैठे हुए हैं, वो कभी नहीं बैठ पाते. आपको बोलने का मौका मिला, आपने जो कुछ कहना था आपको कहने का मौका मिला, आपको अपनी पब्लिकेशंस करने का मौका मिला, आपको किताबें लिखने का मौका मिला. But today, this debate is even divided between the Congress kind of journalism and the BJP kind of journalism. The state by nature doesn't like free press. That's the job. And if the press has to survive, if the press has to stand up, then the press has every right to stand up, look into the eyes of the Prime Minister and say, Mr. Prime Minister, you are wrong. But today, if you do that, आप उनके पीछे क्यों पड़े हुए हैं? सवाल पूछना गुनाह है क्या? जब आप मनमोहन सिंह से सवाल करो तो आप कोई एजेंडा नहीं चलाते हो. जब आप अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी सवाल पूछो तो आप कोई एजेंडा नहीं चलाते हो. जब आप नेहरू से सवाल पूछो आप कोई एजेंडा नहीं चलाते हो. लेकिन अगर आज सवाल पूछो तो आपका एजेंडा है क्या? आप इतना नफरत क्यों करते हैं? आर यू हेटर? इतनी नफरत नहीं करनी चाहिए. The fact of the matter is, it's the job of a prime minister, it's the job of a press, journalists like me, to ask questions. We are not asking questions to an individual. We are asking questions to a prime minister. It's good that we discuss democracy and emergency together. And anybody who is in senses should realize that emergency was a dark chapter in Indian history. but that was done constitutionally. I want to know what's wrong with us. If it's wrong with that other religion, it's their problem. And I say with great concern that any ideology, any ideologue who suffers from deep inferiority complex can never do justice. Neither in journalism nor in politics. This will take the country to a deep division, and finally the entire population has to suffer. Again, I'll reiterate, that fascism comes to the country only through democratic means. Thank you.
A very conscientious and a very thoughtful face to all of us from Sanket. Floor is yours.
Generally, it is expected that when you say that here is a journalist who left a television channel and started a digital venture, it is quite obvious and normal to assume that he wasn't having his say in TV because TV has become like this, TV has become like that. But may I please tell everyone, I am not looking for anyone's pity. I have not done this or taken this decision out of, a problem. It is something whose time had come. In fact, I think the time had come yesterday. I should have taken this decision long. See, a debate like this is very, very good because as an anchor, as a TV news presenter who used to anchor the oldest running debate show on Indian news television, I'm sure you all must have watched it, called The Big Fight. This is on the English channel, and on the Hindi channel of the same group. I also was the host to the oldest running debate show on Indian news television in Hindi. The name of that show was Muqabla. So I know debates are very, very important. In fact, in one of the promo lines, we also used to say that debates are essential, not just for discussion, but for humanity. It ignites our mind, opens your mind up for different views, opinion of different hues. I don't think we should expect that journalists must be absolute in their opinion. Let me break this up in two parts. Number one, as a journalist, I'm supposed to only consider one thing absolute, that is the fact of a story. As a journalist, I'm also supposed to have an opinion. As a person who used to host these two very important shows, I had an opinion. I'm not going to sit there as a doorknob. You tell what your opinion is, you tell me what you... In fact, Dr. Sarkar right here in the middle, did you notice what he was doing? After each and every speaker, he gave his own 2 bits. Well, that's a thinking man. That is, congratulations, a very good journalist. Thank you. So as a journalist, I'm supposed to have an opinion. There is only one condition in which I will have no opinion, or I will be truly neutral. This is a wrong assumption to expect that journalists must be neutral. You know that one condition when an individual, forget journalists, one condition where an individual will become truly neutral. Anyone? Thank you. The day you are dead, that is when you become truly neutral. Till that day, you will have opinions. Let those opinions be based on absolute facts. The problem is that the opinion has become absolute. So Paranjay Da said, journalism is to speak truths to power. Paranjay Da, I say, that is not my job as a journalist. My job is to speak the truth, whether to power or to anyone. If you, for instance, are not saying something right, it will be my duty as a journalist to correct you, question everyone, question everything. The only thing that you must question is the fact of the argument that is being made. The fact has to be absolute. So if in that context, an opinion is being made, it is good. Saket Gokhale spoke about anchors becoming party to a conversation. Why should they not become a party to a conversation, Saket? Okay. Even if that is the case, if Saket says that you should not become a party, here is what my opinion is. Certain facts of a story will force me to opine twice in favor of Saket Gokhale, or 2 times in favor of Priyanka Tibrewal's party, 3 times in favor of what I feel is accurate and nobody is raising that point, which is where the whole point of absolutism comes in. It's okay. My point is, suppose if I don't agree with you, and you and I have had great disagreements in the past also, and that too on Twitter. But that's okay. I'm not supposed to agree with you. Similarly, I'm not supposed to agree with you. Why is there this moral compulsion that I should agree with someone or disagree with someone, and that too with absolutism? No, I will not. That is not my job. In that context, it is not my job to please. And I don't think a lot of these people are doing it. And even if they are doing it, that it is their rights to believe in what they believe in. To say media should be independent or independence of the media, I don't understand these things. If I can back up my thought with a very, very logical reasoning and facts, I think I should be entitled to believe whatever I believe in.
Do you know why there are so many people on the other side who were journalists and now have become politicians? Because as journalists, they were used to presenting. Then they decided to please. That's why they changed their profession. The other singular observation that I have for the right honorable members of the proposition is that they seem to have all come here to disseminate their own political agenda, and they were struggling to fit in the motion of the debate within that agenda somehow, and it occupied the least amount of space and time. You know, Mr. Ashutosh asked the question, what is wrong with us? And the answer is everything, because you don't understand what the motion is. What we are trying to say is, we are not trying to say journalists are heavenly creatures who objectively report everything. We are saying that journalists have to present first. Pleasing or displeasing depends on who the observer is. Is he from Calcutta? Is he from Delhi? Is she from Calcutta and he from Delhi? Where is the observer that is looking at your presentation? That decides whether you're pleasing or displeasing. So the presentation comes first. Saying that the job of a journalist is to please is like saying the job of a traffic policeman in Calcutta is to prostrate himself before every member of the ruling party that crosses the road. No. The job of the traffic policeman is to direct the traffic. But when he sees people with blue lights or he sees people with blue and white colors, he has to allow them to break the rules and look the other side. That is the difference between presentation and pleasing. For a journalist, his job is important. Remember, there is no job security. This insecurity he suffers from makes him present with a bias because he has to remember he has to keep his job. And remember those words. It is impossible to make a man understand something really simple if his monthly salary depends on not understanding it. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, sir, our point is to, number one, presentation precedes pleasing or displeasing, and presentation and pleasing are very fluid terms. You cannot treat them absolutely. You had 7 people raise your hands for us. Remember, there are 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 seas, 7 continents, 7 wonders of the world, and the next wonder will be that these 7 will be 70 in the next few seconds. Thank you.
Sandeep, thank you. You know, Parunjoyda, you've been really demanding your 2 minutes.
Let's understand 2 things. This debate was less about journalism and more about politics. To hold my colleague responsible for bringing politics is absolutely ridiculous. Politics is life, okay? Journalism is life. The problem with my opponents is whether the Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee or Sanket, I didn't know which side they were on. Seriously, I couldn't make out whether they were speaking on our side or their side. Be that as it may, I will make a few observations and correct a few facts. Let's start with Deepak. He dwelt a lot on the emergency. He didn't talk about the fact that the emergency lasted 21 months. For almost 10 years, we have an undeclared emergency. And that's still going on. I must correct some of his facts. He said Sonia Gandhi, without mentioning a name, never gave an interview to a mainstream journalist. He's wrong. She gave an interview to Shekhar Gupta. And if Shekhar Gupta is not a mainstream journalist, then Deepak, you're not an advocate. There were several references made to the ownership. Why don't you name names? 2 of the biggest owners of the media today are not political parties, but Ambani and Adani. I should say something to you, madam. Ms. Priyanka Tibrewal. She's a woman, right? She represents half of this state, half of humanity. Did she even comment once? Mahua Maitra, the kind of questions that a member of her party asked in the ethics committee? Did she ask? Does a member of parliament, a male member of parliament belonging to her party, ask her, has the right to ask her who she speaks to at night and where she stays? Did she talk about her member of parliament, Ramesh Viduri, who used obscenities, describing people in the most obscene words, right? Called him circumcised, called him a pimp. I'm mentioning these words because she kept quiet. Let me just tell you something. People were asking, why aren't we asking questions to Mr. Modi? The reason is he does not give us an opportunity to ask questions. As I told you right at the beginning, he's the only Prime Minister of India who's never faced